Welcome back. Today we're gonna be talking about Demon Souls, the second to last one in this series where I've been going through all of the FromSoft Souls games and 100% completing them, which means just getting all achievements in them. Usually that revolves around 3 playthroughs, getting all endings or weapons, so on. Today we're going to be covering Demon Souls. Demon Souls is a PS5 exclusive. However, Demon Souls is also the original Souls game. The original one coming out in 2009 and getting a remake in 2019. We'll be covering the remake today. Now, in order to get the Platinum Trophy in Demon Souls, you will need all the rings, all the miracles, and all the spells in the game. This will take about 3 playthroughs. You'll also need to do at least 1 invasion and kill the person that you are invading and help somebody fight a boss. Now, luckily, Demon Souls feels incredibly smooth to play. Demon Souls is one of those games where it has a lot of things that it does really well and a lot of things it does really wrong. So let's just start out with the positivity and talk about the things Demon Souls does incredibly well. One of those things are the combat system itself is one of the things that I feel like Demon Souls does incredibly well. Demon Souls has a combat system that just works. This can be said for all of the games. They all feel incredibly smooth to play. It's just there and it hits completely different. Especially once you get your greatsword, which for me, soulborn was the weapon that I completely fell in love with, like many others before me. It does massive damage. It has a cool effect where it burns enemies with this blue fire, and it is incredibly pretty to look at. It is one of those things where it's not in the sort of grotesque enough era and not sort of in the human enough era where it feels fantasy enough to the point where it just feels good to look at. It's pretty, it's gorgeous, and it feels good to play. And the same thing can largely be said for All of the Worlds. All of the Worlds largely are incredibly fun and interesting. Now, some of them have bad elements. As an example, World 2, so the Stonefang Tunnels, has this area where it's essentially just a maze underground, and it feels kind of janky. It's not the best. Not because it's sort of, a tunnel. It's because it's as confusing as it is. You'll often get lost, and I found myself multiple times just completely not knowing where to go in there. I didn't quite enjoy that as much as I enjoyed the rest of the game. And the same thing can also be said for the Poison Swamp, specifically the first area, so right before the Poison Swamp in 501. That area sucks major dick, and it does that because often when you're fighting you end up being pushed out of the map, and that is what kills you, and you can sort of get past it. But the fact of the matter is, very much like I critiqued Lords of the Fallen 2023 for, this game also has this thing where a lot of enemies are hidden behind like barriers to just push off the map, specifically in that area, and it sucks. It's not becoming more fun because it's FromSoft. This is still really fucking annoying to deal with. It's also just an area that entirely, in general, like the entirety of 5, feels kind of janky, but it's just because of the amount of poison that goes around. Very much like Blighttown. It's one of those areas where I get into it and I just want to have it over with. Like, I want to end the suffering now. And luckily, it isn't that long. Like, most of the areas you can go through fairly quickly. And even luckier, it is probably the only area in the game I can say I genuinely fucking hate. The rest goes from just being mildly okay to really fucking good. The entirety of One Buletaria is fantastic. I love everything about it. The castle, Tower Knight, all of the bosses there, the enemies, the designs, it's all good. It's really good. It hits the medieval Europe perfectly. It hits it on the dot. And it also does the high fantasy thing where there's all of these mystical creatures there as well, and I like it a lot. Like, I really do. I genuinely love that area. And it has its own fair share of jank. Like, there is the entire fucking bridge with the dragon on those way to Tower Knight, which is kind of janky but survivable. There's a lot of small things there, but it's really good regardless. And it is definitely well remade in the new remake. And honestly, I can say the same thing about mostly all of Stonefang, mostly all of 3, and mostly all of World 4. The only thing is in World 3.1, the prison cells in the tower is kinda annoying, but that's only really because the enemies are annoying. The Cthulhu looking dudes has this attack where they stun you and then they come, and I don't know how else to describe it, but they give you a good old kiss, and once they kissed you, they spit you back out, and that's basically all your HP go on instantly. That can be mildly annoying, but the rest of it is fine. Now, design wise, like I talk about the Cthulhu anecdotes. I have to say, it's much more grounded. It's not as grotesque as something like Elden Ring, or for that matter, Bloodborne or Dark Souls 3. This is much more in the sense of not being like entirely just fucking out there yet. You can definitely see that they were on their way, especially in everything that has to do with the swamp. Like, they were on their way to some grotesque things. There are the poison babies, as I like to call them, that spawn in the pure blood demon fight. But there are some clear things that very clearly are grotesque. However, something like the old King Isnt being just a guy with wings very much speaks to the more grounded sense that it isn't entirely out there with gaping dragon or bloodstuffed beast yet. And that thing can be entirely also be said about the weapons and everything else. Much more grounded, much more real. You could definitely see Boletaria especially being a place that actually would have existed. Some castle built on top of mountains and so on. Like, you can see it. And it's fantastic to go through. And I think I'd say the same thing about the Stonefang Tunnels. I love the sand deserty area. I love Flame Lurker. And when we speak about Flame Lurker, we also have to speak about the bosses. Flame Lurker is one of those bosses that if you play Demon Souls, you've likely heard about at the very least. Here's the one that I've heard a lot of people call the most difficult, or like the only good boss in Demon Souls. And that's because Demon Souls is in general a game with a lot of gimmicks. When I say that, I mean that mostly all of the boss fights within the game are filled with gimmicks. Most of them are not the like sort of outrageous gimmicks. As an example, Tower Knight is hit the ankles until he falls down so you can hit his head and kill him. And as an example, the old Dragon Guard boss fight is literally hit the two pillars until they break and don't be spotted by him. It is a stealth encounter in a soulborn game. I'm not a big fan of it, per se. Now, there are places where it's less outrageous, such as the Fool's Idol boss, that if you know about the fact that you have to kill an NPC on the side of like a wall to stop her respawning, because otherwise she just keeps on fucking respawning, it's not that bad. Because she clones herself in like a million different places, and by using the target lock you can find out which one is the real one by not seeing a health bar. If you don't see a health bar, it's because it's the boss one, as a health bar is on the bottom of the screen. However, if you haven't killed the NPC on the side of a wall, she'll just respawn infinitely until you do. It's less of a fight, more of a puzzle, as the second that you discover that, she goes down practically instantly. She is an easy boss, but only if you know about that NPC. Same thing can be said about most of the other bosses. Most of them are fairly on the easy side if you know about their gimmick. However, if you don't, they're obviously gonna be harder. The rest of the boss fights that really are hard, that really are like you need to learn and get good and like dodge like you do in other Soulsborne games, is the Penetrator, it is the old King Isnt fight, and of course, you could not forget Flame Lurker. Those are like the sort of main fights where there isn't a whole lot of gimmicks, it's just you having to get good. And even then, in the old King Isnt fight, there's a gimmick where he can grab you and lower your soul level. That means you'll drain a random one of your stats, so you'll have to go back and level up. Now, luckily, it is really well telegraphed that you can fairly easily avoid it, but it's still mildly annoying when it happens. However, it also has to be said that it can be beneficial for some people, as it lowers the stats that they don't want. Well, it might. It's completely RNG. So you lower the stat that you don't want, and then you level up in a stat that you would rather have that level in. Now, there's also an entire gimmick for the entire game. I call it the game gimmick. It's called tendency. There are two different forms of tendency. There is character tendency and there's world tendency. To begin with, let's talk about world tendency. World tendency is better or lighter, so it goes up by killing bosses. That's the way you do get your higher world tendency. This will allow you to get into certain areas and get certain items that you can't on a low tendency world. It also makes the enemies easier. Okay, they have less health, they do less damage, and same thing goes for the bosses. Now, on the opposite side, you have black world tendency. you get that by dying in human form. Human form can only be gotten by popping ephemeral eyes, invading, or killing a boss. When you kill a boss, you automatically go into human form. There are benefits to a darker world tendency. Certain NPCs might not spawn, there will be invader NPCs, and on top of that, there are new demons you can kill. There are a lot of more enemies and they all do more. Same thing goes for the bosses, however, they also do more damage and the world is entirely harder to navigate. Now, that is balanced alongside with a character tendency. Character tendency is a very similar system. Certain things are locked behind it, there are certain areas you can access, and so on. Character tendency is gained by helping other players by killing bosses, killing invader NPCs, so having the lowest world tendency and then killing the invader NPC that spawns, and of course lastly you can also lower the character tendency by killing NPCs or invading people. Now the issue is here that you want to sort of have either one or the other. You want to focus on one or the other in general. If you're going for the platinum, you'll need to have both the highest possible character tendency and the lowest possible character tendency, because the foe swing and the ally swing are both locked behind exactly that. There's also a weapon that allows you to deal an insane amount of damage depending on how high or low your tendency is, and there again are benefits to either or. I would prefer personally to go with the wider tendency, as it allows you to get a certain weapon that you can get in the Dragon Guards arena, and the lower one just doesn't. And the same thing goes for the world tendency. I generally play in a wider world tendency because it makes the game a lot easier, whereas the darker world tendency makes the game incredibly hard in comparison. However, there are strategy to this. As an example, you can take the world that you generally found runes on. For me, that was the Shrine of Storms, and you can lower the world tendency there to make more money while you're farming. You can also lower the world tendency in the different worlds to get the NPC invaders so you can kill them and get a wider character tendency. In that way, there is a little bit of balancing. It is a balancing act that you'll sort of have to figure out how to play. Overall, I like the system. I think it's implemented really badly here because sort of NPC dying can also happen through actual just enemies killing them. And it is really fucking annoying when you've been working on getting your character tendency up and you've been going really well, and then an NPC gets poisoned and dies, and that lowers your character tendency because an NPC died. That's fucking bullshit. That's really annoying. Why? It's also annoying when a guy like Patches sets a trap for you, you then kill the trap and he dies to the explosion. That is kind of annoying that lowers character tendency. Like, why? I also just don't think it's used for a whole lot. It is one of those systems that exist. It's great, it's fun, but it's never really used for anything major, unfortunately, despite its very unique uses and a very unique purpose, right? Like, not a lot of games have the balls to do that. I do want them to revisit that system eventually, as I find the idea of dynamically changing the world as you play really cool. I don't think this was the right way to do it though. I think maybe at least removing the thing where if an NPC dies to damage that isn't yours, it lowers your tendency would be nice. It would definitely be a step up. I also think more ways to just make tendency go either way would be nice, because I'll be honest, by the end of my third playthrough I threw myself off more bridges than I could count to, and it was getting a little bit old. So to have other ways to just lower the world tendency, and the same thing with character tendency, because this incentivizes multiplayer. As you being in human form makes you get invaded, which you want to avoid because dealing with other people is annoying. So you end up never being in human form, so you can also get your pure white world tendency. Now it has to be said as well, I have talked a little bit of smack about Demon's Souls, but overall I do think it's a really good game. And there are, like I said, differences specifically in visuals when it comes to the remake and the original. And not just in the sense that the original is lower res, but also in the sense that there are specific areas where they've recolored things. They have changed the look of certain enemies completely, and most damnly of all, to me, there is a specific statue that was changed from this Japanese looking ass statue to just being your standard medieval European statue. There are a lot of small things like that, depending on how much you care about it, will definitely annoy you, and it'll be a thing where you're sitting there like, why was this changed? And why should it be changed? And you know, it's not one of those things where it makes me just question why. Why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense to me. Just remake it, man. Like, the game was fine in its original state. It didn't need the different renditions of different areas, right? Like, and the thing is, it also sort of changes some lore things, as certain factions have these colors and now that change and that doesn't make any sense anymore. Like, there are things that definitely is annoying regarding the remake. I think the original is probably in a sense more special because of that, because it is the intended FromSoft experience, not the Bluepoint experience. And I think I would like to eventually also try the original. As I did really enjoy Demon's Souls. I think Demon's Souls is a fantastic game. The remake is really, really solid. It hits completely right, and the first playthrough is unlike anything I've ever tried. Now, I also have personal history with the game. It was the first Soulborn game I saw my stepbrother play. It was why I eventually later on, a few years later, I would pick up Dark Souls 3 and start playing that, and I fucking hated it. And sort of without that game, I would have probably never picked that up, so I do have some personal history with it, and that makes it sort of even more special to me. Now, that being said, thank you all so much for watching. I genuinely am really appreciating the fact that you decided to spend your time with me here today, and thank you so much. I am currently working on the Elden Ring video. I hope that I can have it out soon, but Elden Ring is a lot bigger than Demon's Souls, and it also has a incredibly huge DLC that I haven't touched at all, and I'd like to play through them both and get all the achievements. So I will see you next time. We'll see what game it will be, but again, if you stick around, I'll see you then. If not, that's completely alright. I hope you have a fantastic day regardless. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I am out.